I walked up to this podium right now and I did this. Hey y'all, I'm about to tell y'all about this book that I wrote, and you know, it's a really good book that I want you to buy. But it's about my life story, and so, you know, it's just about things that I had to go through when I was a young girl. Would you take me seriously?
Nope.
No. Probably not. And I'll say this because the person's not here. But there's a young lady at my church, and she wrote a book. And one day we were, after Bible study, she talked about, she wanted to get up really and ask people to come out to her book signing. And she kind of got up and she said, well, y'all, you know, I have this book that I really want y'all to come out, and I'm doing a book signing on Thursday. And, you know, I really like y'all to come out to it because I'll be signing the book. And most people, I would say, kind of tune her out. Because to me, that wasn't a professional way of promoting yourself. And if you can't promote yourself in a professional way, then how do you expect for someone to take you seriously? Now, as authors, you know, most of us aren't public speakers. But public speaking is one of the best ways of promoting your book. Our last meeting before the branding, I think we talked about marketing your book. Was it guerrilla marketing? And one of the methods or strategies that Barbara mentioned, or Barbara Antreme mentioned, was actually going out there and speaking. Normally, speaking gigs are free, you don't get paid for it. But you get a group of people in one place and you are the expert. Once you stand in front of the podium or stand at the podium, you become the expert in whatever it is that you're talking about. So if you're talking about your book and that is what you're trying to promote, then you want to be able to put your best foot forward. You want people to take you seriously and then take your product seriously. Now, I'll admit, 5 years ago, I couldn't stand in front of a group of people to save my life and actually have a conversation or give a presentation. I had an accounting degree. I was managing an accounting, a CPA office in Tallahassee. I could speak one-to-one, but I found that in a group setting, in the meetings with the bosses, I froze up. Not that I didn't know what I wanted to talk about, but just being in front of everyone. My palms sweat. I'm kind of fair-skinned, so I got bright red. And then I started fumbling and mumbling over the things that I wanted to say. So my bosses didn't take me seriously. Because how do we have someone representing our company that cannot articulate herself properly? And that was where I was. And so at that point, I had decided that I would join a group where public speaking was taught. I joined Toastmasters, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, because that's really not my purpose for being here today. But that was a group that helped me take public speaking a little bit more seriously. One of the things that I did some years ago was, my daughter was graduating from preschool. And someone had this grand idea that Margo would be the person to give the thank you note to the guest speaker. So I went up and I held onto my notes, and I was all excited that I was about to be finished. So I got a little cocky with myself and put my notes down because I had one more sentence to say. I was going to wish her much success in her future. But I wished her much sex.
No, you didn't. No,
yes, I did. And maybe that was a good thing. But for me, it wasn't. I stood there, and to be honest with you, most people didn't realize that I had made a mistake until I started trying to correct myself. And then it started registering in people's mind that, oh, hold up, she said much sex in the picture. Okay, and so everyone started laughing. And I got more and more embarrassed as I stood there. And just, you stand there and you're like, okay, can this floor just open up? And I drop down. But that was one of the biggest faux pas I've had in public speaking. So what I want to do is give you some tips really about what happens before the speech, before you actually stand up here. what happens while you're here, and then what happens afterwards. So the first tip I would say is know your audience. Know who it is that you're going to talk to. Get a feel for the age group. If you're talking to kids, my joke about having much sex in the future probably wouldn't be a good option. I would probably find a better example. Last year I went into prison, and I didn't go to prison. I didn't stay there. They let me out at the end. But we were promoting Toastmasters or Gavel Clubs in the prison, and I was talking about my experience in public speaking. And I was trying to figure out if that would be a good example that I could use, because it was an all-male prison, and there were probably 2 women there, me and one of the staff members in that group. I did it anyway, but it was still something that I thought about, and it's something that all of us have to think about, because if you're going in, if your genre is young adults, there are certain examples that you may or may not want to give in that, with that audience. So if you're invited to speak, maybe at a book club, you want to think of who it is that you're going to be speaking to, what it is that they've done. So if it's a book club and everyone's read that book, then you probably won't go in there and read the book over. You probably take some excerpts, you maybe talk a little bit about why you chose the characters, or why you chose to talk about certain things about that book. So knowing your audience is the first tip. The second one is organizing your speech. Now, how many of you have ever written essays in your life? By show of hands. Okay, so we know that a good essay has a good introduction, a good body, and a good conclusion. That is the same thing with a speech, whether you're talking for 2 minutes or 30 minutes. You want to come up with an introduction that really grabs people's attention. A lot of people ask questions and kind of engage the audience at that time. Someone I know always uses a quote, and how he remembers those quotes beyond me. But he stands up and there are no notes, he just riddles off these quotes. I'm not there yet. I prefer to ask questions and see who's listening to me. And then also, I prefer to engage the audience during the speech and get people involved in it. So you're thinking about those things. You're also thinking about, in organizing your speech, what are you talking about? So today I'm giving tips about public speaking. So that's the body of my presentation. And then the end, with the conclusion, you always think about how it is that you're going to wrap up your speech. You don't want to give a speech and then say, okay, thank you, and then walk off. That's really not the best thing for a speech. So that's the thing that you're thinking about just as you're organizing it. When I prepare presentations, I normally just write notes. Write it in note form, and then I work it through. I decide what's important, what isn't, what examples I can use in the body of the presentation. And that normally helps me, because if you don't have an organized speech, people are going to know. Have you ever, I think most of us probably have been to church one time or the other, and you think of listening to a preacher that goes from here and then rambles on, and then goes there and rambles on, and then comes back again. You don't want to do that, because somewhere in the midst of it you're going to lose your audience, and really that's not what you want to do. Preparing and practicing. So part of the process is, once you've prepared your presentation, then you have to practice it. If you don't, most people will know that you didn't practice it, because more than likely, if you didn't practice, you're going to do this and you're reading word for word. And the more you look down at your notes, the less you engage with your audience. So practice. One of the things that I do is, for Toastmasters, our speeches are normally timed. So let's say I'm doing a 5 to 7 minute presentation. I stand in the front of my mirror, I turn my stopwatch on my phone, and I just time myself going through the process. I practice it by looking in the mirror, because then I see what my audience is going to see. And that's a good thing, because if you're nervous, a lot of times people would see it. I know a lot of times you have people who would stand here the whole time. holding on to this, and most people can see that you're kind of nervous. So if you practice it more, and even to the point of practicing in front of someone or a number of people that you're comfortable with. I haven't tried doing that with my husband because he's a little too critical, so we may have a problem with that. But I do it in the mirror. I think that's an easier way for me to just really figure out how well I'm doing when I'm giving a presentation. And so that's a good thing. Just do it in the mirror. It's you and you. And you should be comfortable enough. The more you practice it, the more you become comfortable with the presentation. So controlling fear. Most of us won't do any type of public speaking because we're afraid. There is a saying that most people prefer death than public speaking. And based on surveys, that is what it is. A lot of people are deathly afraid of standing in front of other people and giving a presentation. But there are ways that you control your fear. One of the things that I do now is breathing. And I'll get you guys to try it. So if you're sitting down there, before your name is called, you sit there and you breathe in, breathe out. In, out. You probably do it for about 20 to 30 seconds, and it calms you. So while you're sitting there and you're waiting and your heart is pounding and you can hear it in your ear, you're doing those breaths, and it calms you down a little bit. So you're not as afraid when you walk up there. And I'll admit, taking the notes is not a bad idea, because you don't want to get up there and you're afraid, and then you lose your space, and then you're trying to figure out where you are on it. But when I say take notes, I'm not talking about word for word notes. You do the word for word initially, and then as you practice it, you get rid of some of it and you create notes. So the presentation for today is on this card. And that means I have the points, but I can run with the details however I want. The only person will know if you messed up in your details is you. But if you practice, then you won't have as much problems with it. Time management. Let's say you go to a book club and they say you have about 8 minutes to present something about your book. Well, if you take 15 minutes, it's a problem, because if someone's speaking after you, now that person has to shorten their speech or speed it up to make up for the time that you took. But then also, you don't want to take, if you have 8 minutes, you don't want to go in there and just take 5 minutes. Because now there's a gap in between, and people are trying to figure out what it is that they need to do with that 3 minutes that they have left. Doing the practice in the mirror with a watch, with a stopwatch, helps a lot, because you can gauge your time. And you'll find that the more you do it, the better your timing gets. Now, I gave a presentation maybe in September or October at a contest. I was a test speaker, and the contestants were going to evaluate my presentation. What happened was, the timers were supposed to actually time my presentation and let me know when I was coming to 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, and that meant at 7 minutes I was supposed to stop. But they forgot to time me. And I'm giving this presentation, and I know in my mind how long this presentation is supposed to be. But the green light never came on, the yellow light never came on, and the red light never came on. And I kept thinking, okay, I know I've at least gone 6 or 7 minutes. What's happening? But I kept talking just a little bit more until I realized I really thought about it, and okay, they're not timing me. So then I just wrapped the presentation up, and then afterwards I asked, were you guys timing me? And they said, oh, we didn't know we were supposed to time you. So that is a good thing about the practicing with the timing, because you have a good idea when you should stop. And I guess one of the things about timing, of course, is respecting other people's time. You definitely want to be respectful of other people's time. So I know I'm supposed to be up here from 30 to 45 minutes giving this presentation. But if I decide that I would take 2 hours, then most of you will probably be upset, because that is your time and you will have things that you want to do with your Saturday. So that's one of the big things about being respectful of other people's time. One of the things that I've learned in being a part of Toastmasters is practice, practice, practice. Right. The more you do it, the better you become. Because if you're constantly shying back and you don't take advantage of those opportunities, you're never going to get better with it. And that was something that I had to just really think about in my life. Because I was always the one that would say, I'll write the presentation, any group work, I'll do the PowerPoint, I'll type up everything, as long as someone else stands up and gives a presentation. So most of the time, I didn't do well if the teacher was grading who actually got up and gave the presentation. I normally didn't do well in that part. But organization and everything else, I would definitely be the person to do that. But then I realized that that was something that was holding me back. And once I got more comfortable speaking in front of people, then when I started my business, I realized that, oh, okay, well, public speaking to some extent is a part of marketing your business, even if it's just giving an elevator pitch. And that's something that we're going to work on as the exercise for the day. Because you going up, standing up in 60 seconds and introducing what your business is, what your book is about, anything like that, again, if you don't do it properly, people aren't going to take you seriously. And that's a part of public speaking, even if it's 60 seconds, just standing up and being confident that you know what you're talking about, you know what it is that you're going to talk about, and that you do it well. So we'll talk about what happens during the speech. So giving a speech opening. Now remember, I stood at the podium and I asked if you would take me seriously if I did what I did. And for those of you who weren't here, kind of slouched around and talked about, you know, I'm Margo and I wrote a book about whatever, and I just want you to buy my book, and I'm going to be signing my book, and, you know, I want you to take me seriously, but I really don't look like I'm taking myself seriously. And that's really what it's about. It is really captivating your audience and making them realize that you're someone that they should be listening to. And I understand how you feel, because I gave a presentation and there was a lady there that was a business coach, and she's been doing public speaking for years. And she went up there, and I had my little notes, and she walked around and she did all of this, and the audience were like, woo! And I'm sitting there, even though I know that I'm a decent public speaker, I'm not perfect, but I sat there for a while and I thought, how am I going to top that? Can I even come close? But I knew what I was talking about. I was actually talking about entrepreneurship and being a woman entrepreneur. And so I kind of knew my topic and I had an idea what I was talking about. And then I brought my little card. So I kept it nearby that just in terms of the points, I could look back at it. And I was able to do it. And most of the audience received it. I actually met a lady in Publix, a young girl in Publix, and she said, oh, you were the lady that gave that presentation. You made me change my major. So that was something that I didn't expect. But don't worry about what the other people are doing when you're giving a presentation. It's you. Even if you don't connect with everybody, you're going to connect with someone. So people say, find a spot in the back and just keep looking at that spot in the back. So if I'm giving this presentation and I'm looking at the clock in the back of the room the whole time, does that connect with anyone?
No.
Okay, so it's better to give eye contact. And not the creepy eye contact where not the creepy eye contact where I'm like so you want it to be a point where the person that you're looking at is not uncomfortable. So you're just gauging, connecting at a certain point without being too staring at the person. And then we talked about the hands. So you think of what do you do with your hands? Technically, what do you do with your body as a whole? And walking around kind of engages the audience. If I stood here the whole time and worked from here, well, I'm kind of cut off. And then I'm short, so you see this part of me anyway. I prefer to be out and just engage the audience that way. Another thing, and I say this to the women more so than the men, we wear jewelry, and they may be cute. We wear earrings, and a lot of times our earrings are dangling. I see a few. What happens when you're giving a presentation and you're moving around like this? Those earrings are swaying, and people start paying attention to your earrings. Because now the women in the room are saying, oh, those are some cute earrings. and you lose their attention for a few minutes. So I had to give a presentation at one point, and I never thought about it. So they were simple earrings, but they were dropped, and 3 of the men that gave the evaluation afterwards said, lose the earrings. And their evaluation was, I spent part of the time watching to see what was going to happen with your earring next than listening to what you were saying. So that's something to think about. Women, if we're wearing tight clothing, just all of those things we think about when you're giving a presentation, because you want people to listen to what you're talking about and not so much paying attention to what you look like. Because our body says a whole lot. Body language, whatever it is. Men, I talked about putting your hands in your pockets. A lot of men do it, and it's a nerve thing. But it's easier to just take them out, even if you're doing this. I had a habit of doing this a lot. And based on what a lot of people say about body languages, I've closed myself off. So if you're giving a presentation and you're standing there, you're kind of doing this, after a while, people don't, you're not relatable at that point. So find something that you're comfortable doing. All of us are not going to do it the same way, but find the things that you're comfortable with doing with your body and then work it, because that's a part of communication as well. And then voice inflection. So we can all hear me, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I had sent an email to Melinda this morning, but I was kind of late, so about giving me the prologue for your book. I read the prologue for her book at a meeting for something a project that I had to do, and it was really engaging. I mean, most of the people were on the edge of their seats trying to hear what I was going to talk about next. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about voice and how your voice and what you do with your voice helps in a presentation. I've heard people read poems, and because they're nervous, they read it real fast, or I'm reading a poem as opposed to I'm reciting a poem. And so you want to be able to do it to a point that it's effective. If you're talking about more than one different person or character in your book, then you want to be able to have people relate to the different characters in the book. Now, I'm going to read the 3 Little Pigs. Take the glasses off because I can't see. There once was a mother pig who was very poor and had to send her 3 little pigs out to seek their fortunes. The first little pig met a man who gave him some straw to build himself a house. He lived happily in the house until a wolf came along and knocked at his door. Little pig, let me come in," said the wolf. "Not by the hair of my chinny chin chin," said the pig. "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in," said the wolf. So he huffed and he puffed and he blew the house in, and he chased the little pig away. So I tried to differentiate between the characters using my voice. Another thing that we should think about is, I know we have a few Caribbean people in the bunch, and we have dialects. Excited, we speak very fast. Angry, we speak very fast. And it's up to us to slow it down. My husband is an American, and we argue all the time because he says, you need to learn to speak English. And I say, I'm speaking English. You just can't understand me. And so it's one of those things where if you're giving a presentation and you're nervous, the dialect comes out pretty much a lot because you start speaking really fast. So part of the practice is learning to just slow it down to a point that everyone can understand you. Because you lose your audience if they can't understand what you're saying. And even when we think of people in the South and people up north, accents are still a little bit different. I spoke with someone from New Orleans, and I love to hear that accent. It's totally different from, say, Georgia, Florida. But if you're giving a presentation, let's say you go up north to give a presentation, and you know, we say y'all, and gonna, and kinda, and some of us, I don't say this, but finna, and fix it too. Depending on your audience, that is inappropriate. So you have to think about those things. And then the other thing, I know in Barbara's note about the presentation guidelines is no profanity. Knowing your audience helps with that as well. If you're giving a presentation in certain places, you want to be sure that what you say, one is that you're articulating yourself properly, and then also that the words that you say won't be offensive to other people. And when you're talking about your book, because really that's why most of us are here, because we're writers, or we have books out there, we have some type of product that we want to promote. We always want to put ourselves out there in the best light. And that's one of the ways of doing it. You want to be sure that people get you, you're relatable enough, but you're not over here or over here, and they can understand what you're talking about. And then also, if you're talking very soft, if you're someone that talks very softly, be sure that you find a way to bring up the volume a little bit more. Because if I can't hear you, somewhere along the line I'm not going to be listening anymore. And you want to be able to do that. We're not always sure that there's going to be a mic. Personally, I prefer not to use a mic because, well, one, I have a big enough mouth. I think I have a big enough mouth. And then also, if you have a mic, then you're spending the whole time holding the mic. That's another thing, because if you talk with your hands and you're holding a mic, you're doing this. And then that doesn't work either. So just be sure that your voice inflects depending on what you're talking about, and then depending on your audience as well. Faux pas. There are a lot of things that we do in public speaking, or that people do in public speaking, that's a faux pas. Now, I grew up in the Catholic Church, and we were kind of solemn people in the Catholic Church. When I got older, I started to go visiting Baptist church, and yeah. So we got a lot of and the Lord said, and whatever. I got to. Hooping and hollers. Yes. So I would sit down in the congregation. I've tuned out the message because now I'm counting how many times the preacher said. It's something to think about. The other thing is ums and ahs. So now y'all didn't know I was doing this, but while everyone was giving the introduction, I was counting the ums and ahs. We had 5, 10, 15, 20, 23 ums and ahs and 2 you knows. After a while, ahs and ums become distracting. My husband and I went to a presentation maybe a few months ago, and the lady that was doing the presentation, her word was right. So everything was, the sun is out, right? We're at a TAN meeting, right? And that became, that was the word or the question she asked at the end of every sentence. So we got in the car, we were supposed to go to 2 meetings. we got in the car and my husband said, well, I don't know if I'm going again. And I said, well, why not? He said, I am tired of hearing her ride. She's going to be the next speaker. I don't want to hear her say ride, ride. Me being a member of Toastmasters, it's a habit. You can't help that. But I was surprised that he actually caught on to it because I started counting how many times she said right. I didn't realize that he was doing the same thing. And so we think about that. When you're giving some type of presentation, think about what it is that you're saying and how you're saying it. You don't want to distract your audience with something like that. So think about being in a 2-hour meeting and the presenter is constantly using arms, ahs, your nose, so just anything that you can start counting. Okay, how many times has she said that? How many of you remember there was a radio show on 96.1, and I'm thinking maybe 4, 5, 6 years ago, where they played this game. I think it was like the game. Who can say a sentence for, it may have been either 30 seconds or 60 seconds without saying or ah. And most people that call could not do that. And I always wanted to be able to do that, and I couldn't. I probably can now, but they're not here anymore. But that's one of the things with us, just in general, when people are doing presentation, and really, those words are filler words. It's, I don't know what I'm going to say next, so I'm going to pause it for a little while until I think about what my next sentence is going to be. We do that with and a lot too. So I would say, I'm having a great day, and I hope you are too. But it's really just trying to figure out what the next part, what are you going to say next? If you pause for a little while, it is just as effective. So you just say, I'm having a great day. I hope you're having a great day too. That's more effective than, another thing that we do a lot, I hear it a lot, and I think it may be more with black people than it is with white people. We say so. We start off a sentence with so, and then we go on. A lot of it is we hear certain things and then it becomes acceptable. And then we think that we can do it all the time. But until someone brings it to your attention, most of the time you don't even realize that you're doing it. My problems have been kinda and gonna. Those are the two words that when I say it, I immediately think, dang, I wish I could take that back. Because I know that is not appropriate. And normally I would say gonna, and then I would think about going to, and then you correct yourself. But it's so common in our language today, and we've gotten so relaxed that those words we don't even think about. And then I think for some of us being in the South too, that's the way we speak. When I was growing up, I went to a Lutheran school, and I had an English teacher who was actually from England.
Right.
You couldn't do that in her class. If you said something incorrectly, she would ask you that question over and over and over and over again until you responded correctly. And then you realize, oh, maybe I shouldn't say that the way I did in her class again. And then you learn. And that's the way it's supposed to be. I did some substitute teaching, and you'd have kids that say, can I go to the bathroom? Can you? Can I go to the bathroom, Miss Thomas? Can you? And they knew differently, because the more you ask them, then they say, may I go to the bathroom, Miss Thomas? Sure. But it's not that we don't know. It's no one ever pushes us to that point that we say it correctly, and then we don't. And as presenters in anything, like I said, the first thing is you want to be professionals. If we're giving a presentation about our business, our books, anything that we do, we want to always put our best foot forward. And that means speaking proper English. Yes, we could go, depending on what it is that you're talking about, it's okay to be relaxed in an environment. So I'm relaxed in this environment. I just said so at the beginning of my sentence. I'm relaxed in this environment. You get comfortable and you want to be able to relate. So definitely I may not always just be straight to the point with it, but we all can see that I can speak English properly, right? You have a question?
Yeah, would you change your way of speaking depending on who you're speaking to? Not what you say, but how you say it.
I probably would. It depends. The thing is knowing your audience before time. I probably would. I had a supervisor when I was at home. I'm originally from the Bahamas. And she could switch it quickly. We would be sitting in the office and she'd say, girl, and what you doing, gal? You doing some work over there for me, gal, or whatever. And a client or a supervisor or whatever would walk in and she would be totally different. Or even, we'll be casually talking and it's, we talk in the slang or whatever. And then maybe 3 or 4 minutes later, I go into a meeting with her, and it's a totally different environment. So it's Miss Thomas, da-da-da-da-da, or Margo, da-da-da-da-da, and she does it to the point of we're not cool here. We're professionals, and I'm going to speak to you like a professional, and you're going to speak to me like a professional.
What if it's not in your nature, that audience that you're speaking to? They're kind of outside of your realm. It's you're talking to someone, but you want to meet them, but you're not actually. It's hard to meet them where they're at, so to speak.
Okay, meaning you're more articulate than they are.
Yes.
Okay, because I'm thinking if you feel that you're less articulate than they are, then I would say practice doing it right. My opinion would be articulate. Maybe they'll take something from you and then they can aspire to be more like you, so to speak. Because if you get down to that level in terms of the way you speak, then they will never learn that that's not acceptable. And I see it a lot in the schools. It's students come in and that's the way they speak at home. So they come into class and that's the way they speak in the class, and no teacher tells them differently. If you don't tell them differently, there is no way that they will learn it. Like I said, the English teacher that I had, at home, we spoke in slang. That was the reality of it. In the schoolyard, we spoke in our slang. But we knew when we got into classes with our teachers, you couldn't do that. And so you learned that that was inappropriate, and you learned to fix it. And I think if we as people or as adults, in some way, whether directly or indirectly, can teach other people that, we're an English-speaking country, that we speak proper English, then they'll learn that there's a difference. And then they'll learn in which place that they should speak the way they speak. So those are some of the big faux pas that we do, the ums, the ahs, the so's, the different dialects. And those are things that with practice you learn to get rid of. In the Toastmasters Club that I'm in, we have Indians, and we have Chinese, and then we have Caribbean people, along with regular white or black Americans. And I've found that a lot of times you may have a Chinese person that's okay, Chinese is their Mandarin is their original language. They learned to speak English just before they came to the U.S. school. So they've been speaking it for about 3 or 4 years and getting by with it. And initially, you really have to pay attention to what they're saying in order to understand them. But you'll find over time, because then they learn how to say things properly, because now you're being evaluated. So if you say something incorrectly, someone's evaluating you. and you learn that, okay, that's not the appropriate way of saying it. And then they learn to slow it down. So now they're talking in a way that people can understand. One of our former commissioners, Akin Akinyemi, was a member of our club some time ago. And he's always said that his accent had been, I mean, it's still strong, but he learned to slow it down a little bit just by being in that group, because you're constantly being reminded of the things that you may not be saying correctly. And that's what we need. We need someone to be able to check it somewhere, whether it's at home, whether it's at school, whether it's at work, is someone just constantly reminding you that that didn't sound right. Or asking you again, can I go to the bathroom? Can you? I mean, can you? And you get it after a while that, okay, well, maybe that's not the right thing that I'm saying. And then you correct it. The last thing with handouts. We all are, I mean, everyone has a book. Everyone has something that they can give away. With using public speaking as a marketing tool, most of the time you're doing it for free. And you're not going to be paid for standing up here and giving a presentation about your book. So directly you don't get paid for it. There's a way to get paid indirectly. I know Melinda Michelle had something that she gave out when she was preparing her book, or getting ready for her book. And it's really just something that tells people, this is who I am, this is what my book is about, this is what my business is about, and I'm going to leave something with you, so that at the end of the process, maybe a week or two later, someone has something from you. So even though you may not get a sale at that point, there is always that potential that someone looks at something you gave from out of their purse or their pockets and say, oh yeah, maybe I need to call that girl and ask her to do X, Y, Z. So you have to try your best to leave something out there. And these are really just information about Toastmasters. If you're afraid of speaking in public, regardless of what your business is, then definitely come out and visit one of the clubs. There are 18, 19 clubs in this area, including Gadsden Correctional Prison for Women. So definitely, I mean, you probably can't go in there, you need clearance, but visit a club and see what it's about, because if you're trying to use public speaking in some way as a marketing tool, the best way to do it is writing. Really, you want people to know what it is that you do. I mean, definitely, because if you go into a networking event, most of the time you don't have an opportunity to give a big, long spiel about what it is that you're doing. So if we're here and we're networking, I'm going from one person and you're trying to engage someone, but you don't want to stand there and monopolize that person's time the whole time. So typically 60 seconds, who am I, what can I do for you? Because you know we always talk about what's in it for me. I mean, that's the way we are. So if I'm listening to you, tell me what it is that you do. I'm thinking most of the time, okay, so what's in it for me? How can I help you? How can you help me? And that's really what the elevator pitch is. When, I don't know when that term came up, but they always say it's the amount of time for the elevator to get from the floor to wherever the floor is, or from the ground to wherever the floor is that the person, some executive is going to, that you're trying to sell your services to. So you always think about it, you have this amount of time and you need to get it done within that time. Because let's say the elevator gets to the 5th floor, he walks out, you haven't given your pitch. So you want it to be brief and to the point. But one of the things, and I know, this was something that we didn't know we were going to do. Well, you didn't know we were going to do, but I did. But the point is, learn it. Fix it in a way that you're comfortable with it, and then you need to be able to recite it, because you're not going to be in an event reading from your paper. That's definitely not the way it's going to be. So you have to think of, and maybe there are more than one things that you do. My business, I have a lot of different things going on. So I decide before I walk into an event what business or what thing I'm going to promote at that time. And that's what you have to think about. So you may have 3 different things going on. If you have a book coming out, or if it's some other service that you're doing, decide on which one it is that you're going to talk about at that time, and then and do the best in making that work. Capture someone's attention immediately, and then keep going on with it.